I have a new business concept that I want to share with you. You can tell me if you think it's a good idea or not. The idea is for a gas station. But it's not like any gas station you've ever seen. I'm going to call it a service station. When you pull up to the pump, instead of getting out of your car, a person comes from inside the gas station, asks you how much gas you want, and pumps your gas for you. Not only will they pump your gas, but they'll also wash your windshield and even check your oil if you wish. All while you wait inside the comfort of your vehicle. Now, isn't that a novel concept? Of course it's not. Once upon a time, all gas stations operated that way. Of course, now, most gas stations offer a choice between islands. You have full-service islands, and you have self-service islands. And some stations offer self-service islands only. Of course, now it seems that in most cities and towns, almost everything is self-service, from gas stations to banks to grocery stores. But when held up to the biblical understanding of how we are to relate to one another, the concept of self-service is an oxymoron. In the Bible, to serve automatically implies an outward orientation toward another person, not serving oneself. But nowadays, doesn't it seem that service tends to flow back to us, even when it appears to be oriented to someone else? Let me give you an example. In the past few years, I've had several parents and youth in different communities ask me to sign forms that said the youth had done a certain amount of community service. 40 hours, if memory serves. I guess it's now a requirement in most local schools that students complete a certain amount of work in the community. And don't think that colleges and universities also don't consider a young person's philanthropic involvement in the community when evaluating candidates for admission. So there is an advantage to be gained for students who serve, even though for all students the service is required, and for many they would not serve otherwise. The advantage, of course, is not only passing high school, but also getting a leg up in front of the college or the university admissions board. So again, even when it appears that service is oriented towards someone else, the fact is, it is flowing back to us, isn't it? And with this in mind, what I want to explore this morning is the motivation behind why we serve. Why do we serve? Why? That question, of course, first assumes that we do serve. I would like to think that that is true of all Christians, but I can't tell you how many people have told me that they enjoy going to big churches because they can be anonymous. They can sit in the pews without being asked to do anything. They're just too busy with all of their obligations to help out at the church. Jesus said he came not to be served, but to serve. But I wonder at times if lots of people don't attend church with just the opposite way of thinking. For those of us who do serve, I would argue that for many, it's out of a desire to make a difference. We want our lives to have meaning. We serve so that we have a purpose, so that we feel that we're doing something to give back and help out. I admit that this is one of the main reasons I think that I went into ministry. And I ask, is there anything wrong with that? Well, yes and no. No, because we all want to feel like our lives mean something, don't we? That's human nature. But what's potentially wrong with that approach to serving is that we're serving in order to make ourselves feel better. And then, in essence, we are engaging in self-service. And the people being helped are just a means to the end of our own self-fulfillment. Isn't that true? In his book, Death by Suburb, David Getz tells about how he volunteered for a ministry program that helped inmates transition back into the world after their incarceration. He was paired with a prisoner named Pete, who was close to his parole. Getz met repeatedly with Pete, working with him to help smooth the difficult transition from prison to a local halfway house. Getz said that he had big dreams for Pete that included Pete marrying his girlfriend, buying a house, and settling down. So imagine Getz's anger when he found out that Pete had been arrested again after only a few months out of jail. Getz said he was furious because Pete had jeopardized all of Getz's plans for him. Getz was using Pete in his pursuit of significance. He wanted to help a poor person, quote, live the dream, just like him. Forget that maybe that's not what Pete wanted or needed. In our performance-oriented culture, we expect results from everything, even our service. If we're going to put in the time or the money or the talent, then we expect change. And sing out if you disagree with any of this. Years ago, when Susan and I became co-coordinators of our home church's Out of the Cold program for the homeless, I remember thinking how meaningful the work would be. What a huge difference we would be making in people's lives. But as it turned out, that was not always the case. Many of our guests argued with us about our house rules. Many complained about the food, or about the floor mats on which they slept, or about not being able to leave the room to go outside for a smoke after lights out. I was furious. How could we put in all that time and effort, I remember thinking, only to have these ingrates complain time and again? I expected to see smiles of gratitude stretched across their faces. I expected the word thank you to be first and foremost in their vocabulary. I expected to hear stories or about people finding jobs and getting off the street. I suppose at the time, I wanted our church to stand out from the pack as the best shelter in town. After all, what's the point in helping others if we're not going to see some results? But what I learned is that service can be messy. It doesn't always end the way we want. That's why Getz says we often find ourselves mostly serving in safe or comfortable programs where we won't get dirty or get too close with someone in deep need and risk that their disease may run off or rub off on us. There are people who need friends, who need money, who need guidance because they're in such deep poverty or despair. But why get involved in that? There's no upside for us. Which leads me to think that if we can't get results from our service, then at least we should get some recognition. But on that score, I think we often confuse visibility with significance. We think that the more visible a service is, the more important it must be. How can our lives make a difference if no one sees us making a difference? I don't think we consciously scream, "Look at me," when we're serving. But it's human nature to want to be appreciated. Isn't it? But if you spent any time serving in a church, you know that not all the ways we serve are going to be glamorous. Not every ministry in which we participate will be recognized and applauded. But there's a difference between visibility and significance, isn't there? My nose is visible, but I can live without it. And although my lungs aren't visible, I say they're pretty significant. Some ways of serving are more visible than others. But that doesn't mean they're more meaningful than others. The challenge for us is to first make the move from self-service to full service, where our focus is on serving others. But then, to make the next step to God service, where our reason for serving is not visibility, it's not even importance, it's obedience. It's obedience. Getz says, finding our purpose comes not from the results of service, but the act of obedience. No matter what the call, inner freedom comes as I pursue truth, justice, and righteousness without needing to be seen as right or needing to see the results I want. In other words, we serve because we have been served, and we're called to do the same. Now, I hope, I really do, that what I've said this morning will will encourage all of us to serve others more and more. Both here in the church and outside of it. And I hope that what I've said this morning will encourage all of us to serve for the proper reasons. Not for our own gain, not even exclusively for the benefit of others, but for the glory and for the worship of God. Now, I know that almost all of you here this morning are volunteers in one capacity or another. And because there are so many ways you can volunteer in this church, I could scarcely begin to list them all now. But let me simply say that no matter where and how you have chosen to volunteer your time, your energy, your talents, you are appreciated. You are appreciated. Appreciated for your selfless service to others to the glory of God. You are appreciated for all that you do. Because the way in which you serve, when combined with the ways that other people serve, helps to build this church. Which is why I want to recognize every person here this morning. Not necessarily as being associated with any particular group, as important and commendable that may be, but as individuals. Individuals who by your very presence, week after week after week, you offer love and support to one another. Wow. Wow. Because beyond all the activity that we create and all the work that we do, there's something that we bring that is so much more important. In fact, that should undergird everything that we do. And that is our capacity and our willingness to love others. In effect, isn't that what service is all about? Isn't that what church is all about? Each time we meet in our groups to do what work needs to be done, we're given an opportunity to share God's love with one another and with the community at large. We're given that opportunity every time. We are given an opportunity to be the vehicles by which God's love can be shared and the windows through which God's love can shine. That to me is what God's service, not self-service, is all about. Which is why a mutual recognition and appreciation of the work that we do is important. We are all members of the body of Christ. The Spirit's presence is shown in the same way in each of us for the good of all. And so all you volunteers out there who are willing to share selflessly in God's name and to God's glory, your time, your talent, and your treasure, your love and your compassion for others, thanks for stepping up to the plate. Thanks for sharing in the responsibilities. Thanks for caring for others. Thanks for your diligence. Thanks for your dedication. Thanks for seeing the vision. God's vision. And on that note, and in closing, I would like everyone to stand. Stand. And now offer one another a huge round of applause for the work that you do for the church and for the welfare of others. Recognize and appreciate one another for the gifts that you bring and the hours that you spend putting these gifts to work in the service of God. It doesn't get better than that. You have purpose. Your lives have meaning. And thanks be to God.